It's really amazing and beautiful how the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this 1,400 years ago. Like nobody would have known that markets will be so connected, you know? Meaning, if you look at Alibaba and eBay and Amazon, you've got you've got everything basically under the sun in one place. You see, that's one way the markets are connected under one banner. That's one example. Another example would be like for example, if you buy an automobile, if you buy a car. So now you dealt with the automobile industry, right? But in order for you to drive that car, you have to go to another industry, that's insurance, and then you have to go through the bank for the financing. So you see all these markets coming together in the case of the automobile. Even in the case of building the automobile, it comes from all over, parts from all over. You've got the radio and the sound system, you've got the engine, you've got tires, you've got all these industries coming together to create this one commodity. Then markets being interconnected, stock markets, for example, a powerful example of that. Stock markets, it is a powerful example of the markets interconnected. Or the dollar, rising, or if the dollar increases or decreases, it affects currencies around the world, it affects markets around the world. So all that shows you markets being connected together. And that's one of the signs before the hour. Not necessarily haram or bad or anything, but it's just amazing that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned something like this 1,400 years ago, and it is the reality and the norm of markets in our life today. Others mentioned also that it could be that you could quickly find out what's happening in other markets, that they're connected in that sense, that you can very instantly find out what is rising, what is falling, what is doing well, what is not doing well. And then others said it could be the ability to travel. Markets being connected, meaning you could easily go from this market to that market, or from even though the distance is far, you can easily connect. If you're doing business with China, for example, you can be on a plane and then within a day you're in China and you're connected with that market. Whereas, without planes, look how far the distance would be. Anyways, that's really amazing, and that's what's happening right now as we speak. Another one mentioned by An-Nasa'i rahimahullah, the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed from the signs of the hour is a person will want to buy something, but he will be told, not until I seek the permission of the businessmen from such and such tribe. And a person will seek a scribe in a large area, but will find none. Okay, basically this one is talking about how few people will control the markets. And there is such an amazing visual here. Even if you search, there is an image that has all the companies in America and their parent companies. And you'll see that almost every product, they just go back to 5 or 6 major companies that own everything. And you just spend hours going through that document, and you'll be amazed at how many this company is owned by that company. All of them in the end go to, it's going to be, one of the 3, General Electric, and I forget the rest, the major 4 or 5, and everything else is owned by a company, owned by a company, owned by a company, then it goes back to those. That's the same also for news channels, or TV stations. You'll see that in the end there's just 4 or 5 that own all of them. So that's something, again, that's the reality of our world now, and the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that 1,400 years ago. Next one is Sahih Bukhari, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, there will come upon the people a time when a person does not care about their wealth, whether it is from halal or haram. Their wealth. So we're not talking about meat, all right, it's talking about wealth. A person will not care if their wealth is from halal or haram. Now, I'll give you an example. Look, this young man came to me in Canada, and he said that I have gas stations, but I am going to get rid of all of them. I said, why not? And he doesn't sell alcohol, by the way. Doesn't sell any alcohol. But he said, I'm going to get rid of all of them. I'm going to sell all of them. And he's a young man who's got a number of gas stations. It's good business, right? So I said, why are you going to do that? He said, because up to 70%. And maybe this is just, so don't quote me on that, but that was related to his specific area in this part of Canada. He said, up to 70% of is from tobacco, from selling tobacco products. 70% of his income comes from that. Those of you who know about gas stations, you don't really make much money from selling gas. You know, it's like you make 15 cents a gallon or something pathetic like that. But where they really make their money is from the convenience store inside, you know, from selling all these other things. Of course, if you sell alcohol, that's where the majority of the money comes from. Right after that will be the tobacco. And then people buying sodas and wine and coffee and all that. But it's interesting how I knew someone else who was looking for a gas station, and then I told him what this guy said about, 70% of his income being from tobacco, and he just kept looking. This didn't faze him at all. Like a lot of times you'll find people, they couldn't care less where their income is coming from, if it's halal or haram. They couldn't care less. I remember this man, he was a simple man really, this was many years ago. He was working and owned by a Muslim, and so all the other workers were Muslims, and then the owner gets them all together for a meeting and he says, I know all of you work here because we don't sell alcohol, but I'm sorry, I'm not making enough money, so I'm going to have to start selling alcohol. So this guy, and he's just a simple man, but he tells them, I have a better idea. Forget alcohol. Let's sell drugs. Let's sell drugs. I'll help, like a drug ring put together, package it and sell it and all that stuff and cut it. I don't know. I'm going to pretend like I know drug terms. All right. But in the end, he said, we can make a lot more money than alcohol. And the guy says, oh, no, we can't do that. The police will get arrested. We'll get in trouble. He said, SubhanAllah, you're afraid of the police and you're not afraid of Rabbul Alameen. So SubhanAllah, the man was taken by that and he was selling alcohol. Anyways, but the idea that a lot of people don't care where their income comes from. They don't care if it's halal or haram. It's one of the signs before the Day of Judgment. Okay. So, an interesting one here in Al-Adab al-Mufrad narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the hour will not be established until the people build houses which they adorn like the way clothes are. On clothing you'll find embroidery. People will adorn their homes in a similar way. In a very similar way, they're going to adorn their homes. Now, what's interesting is that there's nothing wrong with designing and adorning your home. So it's just towards the end. Okay, let me put it this way. You live at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and people have simple homes that, they didn't even have the concept of hanging a painting on a mud wall or anything like that. So the concept of designing a home didn't even exist really for them, So the Prophet ﷺ, all he's doing is he's mentioning a time in the future when people will be able to design their homes. Now we can put lights on our walls and we can change the walls themselves and put pillars and put arches and put paintings and put those digital frames and I don't know what. The point is just to say that this is how much the world will change, that people will adorn and design their homes the same way you would design a garment now. And that's all it is. It's not saying it's haram. It's not saying it's makruh. All right? Okay. Then another interesting one here. And we're just, like I said, we're just trying to cover as many of the minor signs as possible. And it's just, they're so interesting, aren't they, right? And it's so interesting that the Prophet ﷺ, who was in a completely different world, knew and described our world so perfectly, which is, again, an indication of a genuine Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Narrated by Tabarani, Anas ibn Malik narrates, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the days and nights will not stop. What does that mean? Same meaning. When will the days and nights stop? When the Day of Judgment comes. The days and nights will not stop until the most prosperous person in this world is Luka' ibn Luka'. Luka' ibn Luka'. All right. So, I'm laughing because I visited a country and they had a soda. It comes in a bottle and it was called Luka'. Luka'. Anyways, it's so what does it mean, Luka' ibn Luka'? It's a generic term that means most lowly, the son of the most lowly. It means someone that has a nobody, someone very rich, but it could be not necessarily through inheritance. So لكع يعني a person that is رديء النسب والحسب لا يعرف له أصل ولا يحمد له خلق. لا إله إلا الله. Someone of bad and low lineage, okay, and his origin is not known, nor is any good quality or mannerism known to him. يعني he's not known for having any good quality or good manners or anything of that. So it means these people, they will be in charge of people's affairs, and they will control things or control the wealth of others. So it's not a good thing. So don't go naming your son Luka so he becomes prosperous. I mean, Luka here means someone who's unworthy, someone really, for lack of a better term, trashy, who just becomes wealthy and prosperous. Now, isn't that the case today? All right, I'm just speaking about America. Isn't that the case? And you'll see some trashy and family or a trashy person, and then they have their own reality TV show. And what is on their show? The whole episode, she is fighting with the other one, and they're calling each other names and bleeps, 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 and the whole episode is just garbage. They're just fighting over garbage and hitting each other. And then you go into the store and you see a towel with their name on it. I wouldn't buy a trash can with your name on it, or a garbage bag with your name on it. But now these people, and all we see from them is just bad manners and trashy behavior and fighting and cursing and cussing each other on television. And now suddenly they want me to buy a product and a frying pan with their name on it. So people who have no value, intellectually bankrupt, but suddenly they're popular and they're selling us products and they're making so much money and they're getting deals and all that. Look at just people who are not worthy, and they're the most prosperous. And that's the situation we find all around us. Now, okay. I've got another interesting one here. This is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he mentioned the Prophet ﷺ said, it will soon be that the people of Iraq cannot receive food nor money. You following? It will soon be that the people of Iraq cannot receive food nor money. We asked, from whom would this be? And he replied, the non-Arabs. He then said, it will soon be that the people of Asham cannot receive food nor money. We asked him, from whom would this be? And he replied, the Romans, or Ar-Rum, which at that time also meant the Europeans, didn't mean just Romans in that sense. He then remained silent for a while, after which he said, towards the end of my ummah, there will be a leader who will pour out wealth without counting. Towards the end of my ummah, there will be a leader who will pour out wealth without counting. All right. Now, that's amazing, because it has happened and is happening. The Prophet ﷺ said the people of Iraq will not be able to receive food nor money. And we know, could this be referring to the embargo that happened to Iraq some years ago? It could very well be, and it could, as the scholars always leave it open, it could be that event, and it could be another one coming as well, wallahu a'lam. But the point is that we did see this happen. We did see an embargo on Iraq. They were not able to receive food, they were not able to receive money, people were not able to deal with them financially and so on in business. And one of the amazing things, I remember this, if you remember, Madeleine Albright, who at the time of Clinton, and they were interviewing her, they told her that it's reported or estimated that 1.5 million babies died in Iraq because of the embargo. 1.5 million babies died in Iraq because they weren't able to bring medicine into the country. There was this embargo. And I'll never forget that interview with her. She just looked right at the person interviewing her, and she said, that's just the price you have to pay. 1.5 million babies. Can you just 1.5 million babies on the ground and tell me that's okay? Anyways, so yes, the embargo, and it was from non-Muslims, and non-Arabs could have meant non-Muslims, because at that point a lot of the Arabs were, all the Muslims were Arabs. So at that point, at that time period, if you said non-Arab, it meant non-Muslim. But as we know, the majority of Muslims are not Arabs. So then it said, soon be that the people of Sham cannot receive food or money. And the Sham, and everybody immediately thinks of Syria And could that be the only interpretation of the hadith? There could be another one. We hope there isn't, but this is happening. No food, nor money reaching the poor people in Syria or people in the Sham, and we've seen that. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to facilitate their affairs and give them. So then, and he said this was from the Romans, being the Europeans. Then the Prophet ﷺ remained silent for a while, after which he said, towards the end of my ummah there will be a leader who will pour out wealth without counting. Now, there is little disagreement that that is the Mahdi, because we have another hadith describing him in exactly this way. And that's why, if you remember, we said from the guidelines, you put the narrations together, you get a more complete picture. Okay, this is a beautiful one. Al-Hakim rahimahullah mentions in the Mustadrak, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated, Prophet said, by the one in whose hand is my soul. So the Prophet is swearing by Allah, the hour will not be established until evil and stinginess are prevalent, and until the honest ones are thought treacherous, and the treacherous honest. Okay. The hour will not be established until evil and stinginess are. We see that. And until the honest are thought to be treacherous, and the treacherous thought to be honest. I don't know, do I need to explain that one? We see that all. Okay, if you need an explanation of that, for the most part, look to the Muslim lands and look at the leaders, and that's your explanation. Are the honest ones the ones in power, the ones that are thought to be treacherous, or the treacherous ones thought to be honest? Make a decision for yourself. Okay, this one is interesting here, narrated by Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu narrated, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, before the hour strikes and before the day of judgment comes, people will only give salam to their acquaintances. Taslim al-khassa. Taslim al-khassa. People give salam to those that they know specifically. Only specific people. Commerce will be plentiful to the extent that a woman will help her husband in his business. The ties of kinship, people will give false testimony, and truthful testimony will be hidden, and literacy will become widespread. Okay, so let's see. There are a number of things in this hadith. One, people will only give salam to those that they know. And this is so true right now. Right now, if you don't, a lot of times you find people giving salam to those that they know. Sometimes even in the masjid, they'll see, if they don't know someone, then they see someone they know, Salam alaikum, kif hal. Now, if you give salam to someone that you don't know, sometimes they'll be like, do I know you? I remember one time, and this is like many years ago, or maybe not that many, but I was like 17 or what have you, sitting in front of the house, and a Muslim walked by. This is overseas. So I said, Assalamu alaikum. He said, wa alaikum salam. He went to the store or something. He came back maybe 20 minutes later, walked by, said, Assalamu alaikum. So he came up to me. Do we know each other? You know? But to him, it was like, okay, you gave me salam 20 minutes ago. Why are you giving me salam again? You must know me, the fact that you're giving me salam. But we said from the signs of the hour. And this began, what's interesting is this began at the time of the companions. One time with the tabi'een, a man came and gave salam to just the companion. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that the Prophet ﷺ said from the signs of the hour, taslim al-khassa, that people only give salam to those that they know. And of course you can imagine becoming more pronounced towards as time progressed. That was the first one. People only give salam to those that they know. The second one says, commerce will be plentiful to the extent that a woman will help her husband in his business. And I remember there used to be people who used to misunderstand this hadith. They thought that if your wife helps you in your business, that means this is such a bad sign that you love the dunya so much that your wife is now working with you. Okay, there's nothing wrong with your wife working with you and helping you with your business, because I think we can agree that a woman can go work somewhere, right? She can go work at a company and get a paycheck. It's halal. I hope everyone agrees with that. Now, if she can work at some other man's company, which is better, that or she works at her own husband's company? Which one? So why would it be haram or bad? Yani, it's halal for her to work for some other guy, but for her own husband it's a bad thing? Because, of course we all know the advantage. If she works at her husband's company, then really she's the president of the company, true or false, right? But that's not the point. Is that what the Prophet ﷺ is describing is he's describing a different world to the companions and to that generation. They were living in a time where you would go out to the market, and this is what's interesting. They would just make enough money for what they need for the day. Let's say, I'm just throwing a false number out. Let's say someone knows that they need, let's just say 3 dirhams per day. That's their daily expense. So if he opens a store and he makes 3 dirhams by Maghrib or by Asr, he'll shut down and come home. If he makes 3 dirhams in the early part of the day, he'll shut the store and go home. Like they only got what they needed for the day. Now, even as a business mentality, that's completely different today. Like today, let's say I only need 3 dirhams per day, but if I make him in the early morning, I'll immediately start, okay, well, let me keep working then and put in extra hours so I can make 9 dirhams per day today, and now I'm 3 days ahead, then I can hire other people, and like that. Like that famous story, the funny story about this man who was sitting by, at the dock, watching the sunset. Just enjoying it, watching the sunset and sitting on his chair. Then a young man who studied business comes to him and says, what do you do? He said, I'm a fisherman. And he says, how much do you work? He says, I just get this much fish per day, and then I sit and come and relax and watch the sunset. He says, you shouldn't do that. The young man tells him, you should not do that. What you should do is you should work extra hours, push yourself, even for months, push yourself extra and make a lot more than what you need. He says, then what? He says, then you'll have extra money to get another boat. And he says, then what? He said, push that other boat as well. You're working both boats, extra time, overtime, making more than what you need. He said, then what? He said, then you'll have a whole fleet of boats. He says, then what do we do? He says, when you have that much fish, you can open your own fish warehouse and then sell fish. And then he says, then what? He says, then you can get your own, refrigerated trucks, and you can be delivering, and you can have a whole corporation. He says, then what? He says, once that corporation is making a lot of money, he says, then you can finally retire. He says, then what do I do when I retire? He says, you can sit by the dock and watch the sunset. So he basically brought him back exactly to where he already was, Long story, but the point is that was the same mentality that they had. The early Muslims, like a man would just work when he gets what he needs for the day. Sometimes he would, shut down the store and just, that's it. So An-Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam here is telling you that how the world will become, commerce will be so plentiful. So in the old days, I sold onions, let's say. I would sell onions, and when I make what I need for the day, or I sell the onions that I have, I go home, and my wife is sitting at home. Even if she comes to work with me, there's nothing but to sell these onions. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying that commerce is going to be so plentiful in the future that I'm going to have to, instead of my wife staying home waiting for me, I'm going to need her to come to work and help me out. That's how much business and money there is. So it's not saying there's anything wrong with if your wife helps you out in your business. The ties of kinship will be severed. We understand what that means, and we've seen that. We see sometimes family members that don't speak to each other at all, some others who haven't spoken to each other for years, over whatever it is. But we've seen that, and relationships severed completely. People will give false testimony, and truthful testimony will be hidden, and literacy will become widespread, meaning a lot of people will know how to read. Now, if you compare this one to the one before, to the one coming up now in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Anas ibn Malik, said, the hour will not be established, or he could have said, the narrator says, from the signs of the hour is that knowledge will be lifted, ignorance will become prevalent, alcohol will be consumed, adultery will be widespread, men will decrease and women will increase until there is a single man to 50 women. Yani each 50 women will have one qayyim, someone looking over their affairs. Okay. So we've got ignorance becoming prevalent, whereas the one before it, we had literacy becoming widespread. Literacy increasing and ignorance increasing. How is that possible? One explanation, it could be that we're talking about different time periods, all right? So it could be that literacy increasing, that's one period of time, and then time progresses, and then ignorance increases. That's one. Another explanation could be a lot of people know how to read, but we're talking about ignorance in the religion. If it's talking about ignorance in the religion, knowing how to read has nothing to do with it, which is very similar to what's happening today. Today, most people know how to read, meaning, let's just stick with North America. Like, most people know how to read. And how much ignorance is there about people concerning their own religion, about Islam. So, they don't have to contradict, that's one. But let's see if we can finish this one at least today in the time we have left. The hour will not be established until knowledge will be lifted. We explained last time how knowledge is lifted. Knowledge is lifted when the souls of scholars are taken. It's not by them suddenly becoming ignorant. Ignorance will become prevalent when that happens. So that's why many believe that this hadith is towards the end of time. Even though some of the things are happening today, but it's towards the end of time, especially the 50 women to one man. So when knowledge is lifted from the hearts of or the scholars are taken, knowledge is lifted, ignorance will become prevalent. That's towards the end of time. Alcohol will be consumed. That started already. You know, if you look at whatever, there are about 60 Muslim countries or something like that. How many of them have alcohol prohibited? Like, for real, for real. It's debatable. Like, something we used to have this debate in class. 1 or 2 countries actually really have alcohol prohibited, but then the rest have it by law, but there's no punishment if you're consuming alcohol, and so on and so forth. Adultery will be widespread. And we'll see that. We're seeing that happening in Muslim lands, increasing so much that you wouldn't think something of the top major sins would be increasing so much. I remember I was in a Muslim country, and there was a joke in the newspaper about, it was just, someone read it to me, and I was so offended. Like, how could you put a joke like this for the believing men and women? Like, what is funny about that? Like, now I have no hatred of a major sin. I hear about it and I laugh. That's one problem. And number 2, when you keep joking about things like that, what happens is that it becomes the norm. Like, I'm not shocked or turned off when I hear about that anymore, because it's so much of a joke. And that's why, by the way, I never, ever, ever, just sharing this with you about mastul. واحد مسطول عمل. Even if it's funny, I'll change it to واحد غبي. واحد مش شاطر, But never ever tell these mastul jokes, ever. And when you read all these jokes, you just think that العالم العربي is nothing but مساطيل, بس running around. وعمل لك المسطول ذكي وبيفهم وعنده حكمة, is the only one who gets it. Anyways, the point is that for those who didn't understand what I was saying, all these jokes about people being high and being smart, and so many jokes about people being high that it becomes the norm. If someone's high, what's the big deal? That's why. So make sure, do not joke, jokes about adultery and zina and things like that nature. And if you really think it's funny, you want to share it, tweak it, and make it about something else.